what I want to talk about is the invisible force keeping you stuck, okay? So basically, if you feel frustrated, stuck, if you're poor, then my promise to you is that by the end of this presentation, you will be able to use my 3-part framework to beat 99% of business owners and achieve the wealth and freedom that you desire. Okay, so if you're new or you have no idea who I am somehow, then let me give you my resume in 60 seconds, because this always does happen. Okay, since the age of 24, I've taken home an average of $1.2 million a month. I've sold over 3,000 fitness programs, serviced over 7,500 high-ticket B2B customers, provide supplements to over 370,000 customers, personally built, scaled, and sold these 3 businesses, which is why we are here in this room. And then that led to reaching a $100 million net worth by the age of 28 in the birth of Acquisition.com, where we run a portfolio valued at about $500 million. So, you guys ready to dive in? I'm not going to lie. I didn't know what the intro was, so I was like, fuck it, I'll throw it in. Cool. Let's dive in. Question for you guys. What makes the difference between a place people genuinely love working and one they desperately want to leave? Somebody said it. Their boss. Yes. Okay. Are there other factors? What about pay, working hour, bonuses, incentives? Yes, of course, those are other factors. But those are not the root issue. That's not the reason that so many people are leaving. In fact, that's not the reason that 57% of people are leaving. 57% of employees who quit do so due to their boss, management, or leadership. Some people are always like, somebody comes up to me always at events, they're like, I just don't understand why everyone's leaving. And I'm like, I do, buddy. You know what I mean? Like, we got to look in the mirror, right? And so you don't pick a job, you pick your boss. So let me tell you guys a little story. Rewind back to, 2017, when Alex and I started Gym Launch. There we are right there, before my nose job. And so Alex and I ran the sales team at first. So actually, we participated in the sales for a long time in the beginning of the business because we were so terrified of losing money. And so at some point, Alex got completely out, and then it was just me managing the sales team. And eventually, it made no sense for me to either, because at that point, I was like, dude, I need to move on. I need to build out the marketing. I need to build out CS. I need to build out operations. I need to hire people, right? And so, like any inexperienced manager, what did I do, right? I hired the first guy with a pulse who said he could do it, okay? And so I did not interview anybody. I did not check qualifications. I did not test him. I didn't interview anybody else, right? He was already on the team, so I was like, easy switch. Just, be the manager. Fuck it, right? Anyone ever done that? You guys are lying if you didn't raise your hand. And so I was relieved because I was like, finally, I can focus on marketing, product, CS, and all these other things that I've been putting off because I've been over here like managing the sales team, right? And if anybody's managed a sales team before, you know how much time it takes. So then I was like, what's going on? Because I brought in this guy, his name is John, right? And John was the guy I hired. And all of a sudden, all the sales guys start texting me about a week in. And I was like, what's going on? And they're all like, I don't really like John, LEILA. And I was like, fuck. I'm like, well, as long as the numbers, still continue to go up, I'm sure this is not a big deal, right? But they weren't big fans of him, and I was like, this isn't a good leading indicator, right? Why were they not fans of John, okay? John had unclear communication. So when I watched his game tape reviews, if any of you guys do game tape reviews for sales, I was watching what he was saying to them, and it was like, he would watch and he'd be like, yo, bro, you just can't do this shit again. And I was like, okay, clear. Not clear at all, right? He was unpredictable. Half the time, John didn't even show up to the damn sales meetings. So I got on they had their drilling at like 5 a.m. And so I showed up for 2 days in a row and John wasn't even there. And I was like, where's John? They're like, I don't know. He's here some of the time. He's here some not of the time. We don't really know. And I was like, fuck, okay. He was fear-based. So again, when I watched him run the team trainings and somebody wasn't hitting their numbers, he was like, listen, I'm not telling you that you're going to get fired, but I was like, fuck, right? He was unfair, he was assumptive, and he made a hard job horrible for people, right? Because if you guys have been in sales before, you know that shit's hard. It's like you don't need somebody to be beating you up at the end of the day. You already beat yourself up. You already get beat up by the prospects. And so even though John was technically good at the job, he was rough around the edges, had very few actual management skills, honestly seemed like he couldn't give a fuck about anybody on the team. So, unfortunately, This, combined with our numbers starting to fall, is when I knew that something had to change. Now, what did I do? Because I was still inexperienced, right? Ironically, at the same time, I got an email from a guy named Matt, and he was super excited, and he had a track record of actually building sales teams. And so I immediately booted John and hired Matt without interviewing anybody else, because again, remember, this is many years ago, I was inexperienced. But guess what happened when I hired Matt? Matt had clear communication. Every time I watched his call reviews, it was very clear when he was trying to give somebody advice. He was like, oh, your tonality at the end, like let's flip it up instead of flipping it down. Let's end with a question, not a statement. We got to listen more to the prospects, giving them very tactful advice, right? He was predictable. He was on every single sales meeting. He was up at 5 a.m. every day, and he would message the group in the Slack thread every day at 5 a.m. without a doubt. Every single day. He was encouraging. When people didn't make a sale, he was like, dude, you got this. Like, some people say no. We just move on to the next one. He never dwelled on what happened in the past, right? He was fair, and he didn't sugarcoat it. So even though he was like an encouraging guy and he was positive, he wasn't a ninny. And he made a hard job fun. Because for those of you who have been in sales, and a lot of you still do sales, you understand that it can be a hard thing to do, but if you have somebody who makes it fun, it makes it all worth it. And so can you guess what happened to the sales team within 6 weeks of me bringing in Matt? We went from mediocre to record-breaking. To be specific, we went from a 30% close rate to a 75% close rate. I'm not kidding here. Shock, awe, amazing. Right? And so this experience is what put me on a mission to create a business where people genuinely loved working. Not because I'm like some person that's just like romantic about the soft stuff, but because I saw the difference firsthand how having a boss that gives a shit can affect morale, performance, retention, profit, revenue. How the soft stuff can affect the hard stuff, right? And not to mention, why on earth would I want to employ people who don't like me or don't like the work that they do? Do you guys want to walk into your gym every day and feel like everyone fucking hates you? Wouldn't want that shit either, right? Sounds doubly shitty. So, to be specific, so we can get into the meat of it here, what was the difference between John and Matt? And don't say he was a dick. It's too easy. Okay? The difference is that John used punishment to get stuff done, right? While Matt used positive reinforcement to get stuff done. Let me explain. Let's define terms, okay? Positive reinforcement is the introduction of a desirable or pleasant stimulus after a behavior, okay? Therefore, making it more likely that the behavior will occur again because they got something they liked afterwards. What is punishment? Okay? Punishment is the infliction or imposition of a penalty as retribution for the behavior, making it less likely a behavior will occur again. Understand? Great. Let's give an example here. A lot of you will know this. Who has a dog? Okay, cool. Dog trainers love this one. But so positive reinforcement would be like if your dog, sits when you say sit, you immediately give it a treat. That's an example of positive reinforcement. What's another example of positive reinforcement that we would have in business? The moment someone closes a sale, you immediately give them a high five, right? That is positive reinforcement. Whereas on the other side, we have punishment, which is your dog jumps on the couch, you hit him to get him down, right? Your dog barks, you close his mouth to shut him up. So the difference between the two is what happens after the action, right? Are you reinforcing an action you want more of, or are you extinguishing an action that you want less of? Here's the thing. Both of these work. Let me give you 2 examples of how, so you can understand and we can get into it, okay? And nobody freaking ask me about crypto right now. This is just the company that I chose because it is a grueling example of this, okay? Coinbase, $1 billion company, arguably less or more any other day, but they have about 4,500 employees, right? Majority of the employee base does not last past 15 months, okay? That's their tenure. They have, if you look on their Glassdoor, these are some of the quotes from it. No work-life balance, most intense place I've ever worked. Never know when it's your time to go. Why is it that it still works, right? Because the demand is high enough due to the pay and status of working at this place that they can afford to churn at that rate. They can still get in good people, pay them a lot of money, and it will be fine. That's just the truth. So people are like, why is big corp such assholes? It's like, because it fucking works. It does. I'm not saying I like it. I don't like it. In fact, what I like is this. Neutrogena, $4 billion company, 750 employees. Average tenure, 10.2 years. Absurd. Yeah. What do people say about working at Neutrogena, right? I feel appreciated for my work. There's flexibility and work-life integration. I feel like I matter, right? What do people value about working there? They value the praise they get, the good benefits, and the fair pay. Notice I didn't say astronomical pay, right? People just want fair pay. So, if this is true, and you can build billion-dollar companies using either of these things, why use punishment at all? Well, that brings us to what we discuss here, right? The TLDR. And really think about this, guys. Yelling at people takes less skill than properly training people. So people are more able to do this. And so if you look at, like, for example, when I worked at Subway when I was 15, that was my first job. I was a sandwich artist. When I was there, I know, I smelled like ham all the time. It was pretty gross. Anyways, my boss, it's not like they were positively reinforcing me. You know what she knew to do? Yell at me. Because if I go to someone and I'm like, hey, I want you to positively reinforce a behavior you want more of, they're like, got it. And then they don't do it because they're like, what does that mean? But if I'm like, hey, yell at them if they do something wrong, they're like, amazing, I got it. It takes less intelligence to punish people than it does to positively reinforce people. It doesn't mean that you're like a badass, that you're cool, that you're like, oh, I'm just laying down the law. It's like, no. You're being lazy. So, why is it that people are less apt to switch to this, right? So the way that positive reinforcement works is that it is slower to start out, but then once it takes off, it creates a longer lasting result of behavior change. So why, if we use behavior science, why is it that people are less likely to do this? Because you see less in the beginning. It's kind of like when you put someone on a sustainable weight loss plan, and in the beginning they're like, I've only lost 2 pounds this week. And you're like, that's pretty good. What if you did that for a year? And they're like, but I need to lose 10 now, right? And then they go back to their detox with their tea. Now on the other side, you have punishment, right? So punishment is much faster to start. I bet you if your dog jumps on the couch and you just whip the fuck out of him, he ain't gonna jump on the couch again, is he? Not in front of you. Just being real. But what it does, right, it's faster to start. It creates a long-term dysfunction in the behavior adherence because the other person on the other end will only abstain from the behavior when the threat is present. Anybody ever come home and their dog is literally on the couch and you're like, why the fuck? I've told you so many times not to get on the fucking couch. Every time you jump on the couch, I'm like, get off, right? Well, when you're not home, you're the threat. So when you're not there, the threat's not present. So of course he goes on the couch. He doesn't actually give a fuck about the couch. He doesn't feel good or feel rewarded when he's not on the couch. He just knows he has to avoid it when you're around, right? So what happens is people, when the threat is present, will adhere and they will rebound when it's not. So they both work, but what's the cost? And I want you guys to pay attention to this next slide because some of you will relate to the left side and some of you relate to the right side. The cost of punishment. What does it feel like? What does it feel like to have a punishing environment at work, right? One, it creates an environment of secrecy. People are too afraid to reveal mistakes because they don't want to be punished. They're trying to avoid it, right? And so then they don't actually tell you problems that are going on. Anyone here ever have people hide problems from them? They're probably scared of you, right? Whether you mean to or not, we do not have to try to purposely punish people. We can do it with a glance, right? The second is that it causes significant anxiety and stress. And so when you go into a workplace where people are constantly stressed and anxious, it's usually because they're walking on eggshells because, again, they're worried about being punished. Third, over time creates resentment from the employee to the boss. So if everyone's ever felt like over enough time, it's like all my trainers left and took all my clients or something like this, it's like there was something going on that was creating that resentment, right? Some people were feeling suppressed or punished. It removes feelings of autonomy from workers and creates a feeling of imprisonment, right? What happens then? People do the minimum work not to get fired. This is due to being punished. This is not because people are stupid or lazy. You miss out on discretionary effort, loyalty, tenure, and innovation. Those are all the things you don't get when you rule with punishment. You're not going to have people innovate for you because guess what? They don't give a fuck about you. You're not going to have people stay for a long time because, again, they're just trying to get the fuck out. And you're not going to have people that are going to give you shower time thoughts because they don't feel like they're getting that from you, right? And so people work will work as hard as the bar is high. So you just have to keep raising the bar of what is minimally okay to not get fired, and that is the only way that you can get them to perform. And that is what most companies are run by. Now, on the other side, we have positive reinforcement, right? This creates an environment of security because people are encouraged to make mistakes and discuss them. We openly talk about making mistakes, right? We encourage and thank people for making mistakes because it means they tried, right? Teammates feel a sense of security and excitement when they come to work. In fact, you'll see them showing up earlier. They stay later. Because why? They like being there. They don't feel scared. Over time, it creates immense loyalty and trust from the employee to boss and vice versa. So you feel like an intense bond with the people that you work with. You empower your teammates. They do more work than anybody expects of them, including you, because they like it. Not because they have to, but because they want to. It motivates teammates to utilize discretionary effort at work, right? So you get the shower time that you don't get if you use punishment. And people work hard because they enjoy the consequences of their hard work. They enjoy feeling like they have somewhere that they can make an impact and somewhere where they are rewarded for working hard. So in short, what does this mean? Really simple. We do more of the stuff we like, and we do less of the stuff that we don't like. Work is included. Like, if you guys don't like your business, you're probably trying to avoid it, sell it, what the fuck ever, right? Same goes for people that work for you. So, if you've got your dickhead boss over here, you're going to be on the other side, over there, doing things you do want to do. So if you've ever had anybody who's like, they used to be really involved at work and used to feel like you got a ton of discretionary effort, and then all of a sudden you feel like, man, they're like doing all this other stuff outside of work, and they're like spending way more time with their friends and going out and doing all these things. Why is that? Something happened, something punishing. So that person no longer gets positive reinforcement from their work, they get more of it from outside of work. Therefore, they do more of the thing they like, which is outside of work. And so if we're forced to do the stuff that we don't like, we do the minimum to get by or to avoid punishment. Okay? So if somebody feels like they have to keep the job to make a living for their family, they will do the minimum so that you do not fire them and nothing more. Right? And so if your employees don't like you or like the work, they will just give you the minimal effort to maintain the job. Okay? Anybody in here have someone on their team that does the minimum not to get fired? I figured. Yes. Does anyone here do the minimum not to get? No, I'm kidding. Great. So the question is, how do we actually do this? Because you know what I hate? I hate when people go up and they're like, let me talk about leadership. You need trust and loyalty. What the fuck does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, we need trust and loyalty, and we need people to be nice and positive. It's like, okay, that's great, and I agree with all of that. But how do you do that on a tactical basis is what has frustrated me for years. And so my goal is that I'm going to help you guys operationalize leadership. We're going to go over 3 principles. These principles are going to be tactical. I want you guys to be able to actually do this. Because leadership, people can say all they want. You can say you're honest. You can say that you value people. You can say all these things. If you do not exhibit the behaviors that support those things, it doesn't matter. And the issue is actually not that a lot of people don't want to, it's that they don't know how. And so I would like to give you the how today. We're going to go over these 3 things. Starting with the first principle, which is latency over intensity. Let's go. So latency is the time between events. So if you have low latency, there's less time between events. If you have high latency, there's more time between events. Intensity is the power of that event. So what this means is that the timing of your response to a behavior matters more than the power of your response. We do things that we have learned to do. We learn by experiencing things that happen to us. Okay? Therefore, the things that happen closest, aka low latency, to a behavior or event matter the most. The thing that happens immediately after. Not a day after, not a week after, even if it's bigger and more intense, doesn't fucking matter. Okay? The things that happen closest to an event or behavior of the past determine how we behave now. So something that happened to you in the past, say I'm speaking on stage right now, right? Maybe in the past, people booed me. So maybe I show up here and I act like a little ninny. right? Why am I acting like a ninny? Because the last crowd booed me. Not because of this crowd. It has nothing to do with you guys. Anyone ever dated somebody who just treated them like shit and you're like, why? And it's like, she's getting back for her last boyfriend. It's not you, you know? Anybody ever had a terrible hangover after drinking but still drank again? If you don't, raise your hand, you're fucking lying. Okay? So, the reason that you do, just so you understand this, okay? Because none of you have done this. This is because the closest feedback to drinking, you drink, the first next thing that happens is you feel good. Not the hangover. The hangover happens later at a delay. So even though the hangover was awful and you were throwing up and you didn't even make it to work the next day, the fact that it was at a delay makes it more likely that you will drink again, unless the next time you take a drink, you vomit immediately. Seriously. There are endless behaviors like this in the workplace, okay? Say you've got somebody on your team. They're afraid to tell you that they messed up. Why? In the past, they got punished for messing up. Has nothing to do with you. Has everything to do with what happened last time. Say you have somebody who's afraid to speak about meetings. I see this all the time. What does that mean? In the past, they were punished for speaking on meetings. Say you have somebody who doesn't meet their minimum KPIs for calls, right? And you're like, why is it I told you what the KPIs are, and why are you not hitting them? Do you not understand what that means? They do understand what it means in their last job, because in their last job, they got to keep their job without hitting their KPIs, because they didn't hit their KPIs for 2 years and still didn't get fired, right? Somebody comes in late to work. Their last boss was never around, so it didn't matter anyways if they were late. Somebody speaks to you with an arrogant tone, right? Their last boss let them walk all over them, so it didn't matter. There were no consequences. Your employees are not stupid. Your employees are doing what they have been trained to do, whether that is by you or their past boss. If you do not reinforce the behaviors that you expect, you will get the behaviors that their last boss expected. Okay? And if you have failed to change their behavior, you are likely not a skilled enough teacher to train people below a certain skill level. The less skilled the teacher, the more skilled the student must be. If you want to become a better teacher, learn this right now. When you spot a behavior that you want more of, okay? So let's say it's doing more cold reach outs than you asked. Let's say it's clocking in early. Let's say it's staying late. Let's say it's a teammate owning a mistake. Someone taking work off your plate. Someone helping another teammate. Someone saving a member. Whatever it might be. You want to immediately reinforce that behavior. What you guys need to understand is that if you reinforce enough of the behaviors that you want more of, the things that you don't want to have happen, eventually they will have no energy left to do those things. You don't even need to punish them because they're so focused on doing more of the things that you reward. They literally forget and extinguish the other behaviors. So you need to immediately reinforce. Remember, low latency, not the power. So what does that look like? A lot of people are like, oh, I got to give these huge cash annual bonuses, all this. No, you don't. You know what would be better? If you slapped them and said, you did a fucking great job. Immediately. The moment that they finish. If you give them kudos in front of your team, the moment that they finish. If you post about them on social media, immediately. If you give them a high five when they finish running that class that they crushed. Right? If you give them a small gift card, cash bonus, maybe it's like a gift card and you say, take tomorrow off and go do this instead. If you want more of a behavior, quickly reinforce it. This is why many people try. They're like put in place recognition programs and they put in place all these like huge incentives of like, at the end of the year, you're going to get all this money. It doesn't matter because all the things that happen in between are what matter. The small things that happen after the person does it. Nothing can substitute for that. The high fives, people always ask me, they're like, Leila, how do you build such a great culture? And I'm like, this is actually fucking how. Seriously, these tiny micro movements. It's not the big stuff that matters. It's the latency of the small stuff. And on the other side of that, and for some of you, this is an issue, is that if you want less of a behavior, you slowly reinforce it. So think about things right now that you want more of, that you are slowly reinforcing, right? There are lots of things in businesses, again, like the huge cash bonus at the end of the year. People would do way better if you took that cash bonus, split it up, put it over like every week, and then just handed them like a $100 bill. So we want to think through these things because this works in both directions. If you want less of something, slowly reinforce it or don't at all. If you want more of something, you quickly reinforce that thing. That is latency over intensity. Wonderful. The next one, we've got criticism and insults. This is a large culprit for first-time leaders. Let's define terms again. Okay? Criticism or a critique. A critique articulates the difference between the actual and the ideal. What's the difference? If you guys have ever watched any of my content on accountability, you would also see this, right? It's the same thing. It's just like, what are they doing? What's ideal? What's the difference? We're just letting somebody know of the difference. Versus, right, what is an insult? An insult compares the subject to something that is aversive, something they don't like, something that is negative. So, many leaders, right, confuse criticism with insults and wonder why their teams don't change. And in fact, in the last few years, people have said that criticism is bad. They're like, oh, we shouldn't criticize at all. Well, actually, I think we should. I think that we define terms incorrectly. To critique somebody is what it means to teach somebody. How do you teach somebody if you don't explain to them what good looks like? You can't. But a lot of people, again, insult people and think it's a critique, right? So let's look at some examples. Criticism, right? Articulating the difference between actual and ideal. Here's two examples of exactly how I would say something to somebody at work, right? Johnny, the goal is to make $100 a day. The last 6 days, you made 60. What do you think we could do to make $100 a day? I'm letting him know of the ideal and engaging him to help me get there. Another one. Sarah, you ran the class in 45 minutes, went to a 60-minute class. Next time, why don't we take the full rest break so we can make it 60? Neither of those things sound mean. They don't sound demeaning. They don't sound suppressive, right? That is how you critique. Now, on the other hand, what a lot of people do is the latter. They insult, right? This is what a lot of leaders do, or bosses, right? Johnny, you remind me of Ted. He never worked hard enough to stay on the team. He lost respect from everybody. You need to hit those dials. You remember what happened to Ted? Comparing him to something aversive. Sarah, you only ran the class for 45 minutes. We can't accept laziness around here. Does anybody know someone that speaks like that? Yeah, it sucks. I see some big head nods, but you don't want to raise your hand. Okay. It's like they're sitting right next to me. So the question is this. Do you want to make your teammates feel bad, or do you want them to get better? This is a serious question. If you want somebody to feel bad, insult them. If you want them to get better, you critique them. And actually, the two don't happen at the same time. So if you make somebody feel bad, you steal their energy away from getting better. This is something that took me time to learn. Because it's like, when someone really fucks up, you're like, no, they've got to, like, this hurts so bad, like, they've got to feel it, right? It's like, but why? What do I want to have happen next? If I want them to get better, making them feel worse robs them of that energy to do so. So, if you want someone to get better, you deliver criticism. You critique them. Whereas, if you want someone to feel bad and stay stuck, then you insult them. So, if there's anyone here who'd like to sabotage, just insult them. Like, yeah, the guy next door. No. So, anyone in here realizing why their spouse doesn't like their critiques? Very common, right? You never take out the trash, right? You're so messy. Oh my God, I don't know how you do this. You promised you would do X, Y, and Z, but you never do. It's just like your brother. Just like insulting your spouse doesn't work, neither does insulting your employees. It's the same stuff. It's like, you ever see that couple, they're always just like insulting each other back and forth. You're like in the room with them or at a dinner, it's just like very fucking uncomfortable. And you're like, I would like to leave now, but I can't because the dinner, only the bread is here. Yeah. We've all been there, right? But the same goes for people with their employees. right? Where it's like you see these people that you're in the room and you're like cringing because you're like, how could you talk to somebody this way? There's no way it's actually helping them, right? But here's the thing, guys, is that some of us in here just don't understand these concepts. I think a lot of people in this room probably really want to be great leaders. I think a lot of you want to improve yourselves, you want to improve your communities, you want to improve your business, you want to improve your employees. But then we don't understand how. And these are the main pieces to get there, because a lot of the times, things that are punishing are not done on purpose. Like, it could be a glance that could punish somebody. Because for example, if we use the example of latency, right? If somebody comes up to me and then they tell me the mistake they made, and the first thing that happens is before my mouth opens to say, that's okay, thank you so much, is like, what are they going to feel? They're actually going to feel punished because my face responded before my mouth. And so what's going to happen? They're going to feel punished. They're going to avoid telling me again. Being a leader is tough, right? So the question is this: how do we actually critique somebody? Because I think there's a lot of bullshit out there about this. And I think I did it wrong for a long time because I listened to all these traditional books and these bestsellers on the Wall Street Journal, and all these people who have actually never run businesses talk about how to deliver criticism, and it's all just a bunch of bullshit. So let's talk about how we actually critique somebody, okay? 6 things, and I'm going to make it really tactical for you guys because I think it's very important. The first piece is that a critique has to have direct ties to behaviors under their control. Okay? Not to someone else's behaviors, not to behavior that's uncontrollable by them, not that's one that has to do with them plus 7 other people. Behaviors that are under their control specifically. That's the first piece. Now, the second is that the performer or the employee has to know what the critique means because they have to have the baseline skills. This happens all the time, is that you hire somebody and you're like, I'm telling them that their tonality sucks, but they're not changing their tonality. Well, the reason is because you didn't assess for what baseline skills were needed. Motherfucker doesn't even know what tonality means. How can he improve something he doesn't even know what it means? But we do this all the time. The third, and the most obvious one, faster and more frequent feedback loops work best, okay? So more and faster is always better than less and slower. Even if the less and slower is longer and more elaborate and all of these things, doesn't matter. Irrelevant. Might as well save your energy. Fourth, we want to make it personal. We want to tie their behavior to their behavior rather than a group. So, for example, if you're delivering metrics to show somebody's performance, then it makes sense that we deliver their individual metrics rather than the group metrics. So we want to get as personal as possible with the feedback. Fifth is that an authority, like everybody here in the room, collects the data and feeds it to them. Right? So you're collecting the data, and then you're sharing the data with them. Okay? Now, on the other side, and this is very important, the last one, they also collect the data and then share it with you. So I want to make this real for you guys on the next slide. Here's a very tactile example that is probably one that all of you in this room can use, which is sales. Okay? So how do I critique a salesperson? First, I'm going to critique a salesperson on their close percentage, right? Specifically in the business that I have, for example, rather than total closes. Why? Because they have no control over how many leads they get in their pipeline, okay? Or are on their calendar. But they do have control over what percentage of those leads they close. There's a lot of times where people see in the past, they're like, well, and then the next goes like, well, maybe they should be going out and getting more leads. It's like, if you hired somebody who has the skill of doing that. But that brings us to the second point, which is like, do they even know how to do that, right? So that's the first piece. You want to make sure that the thing that you're critiquing them about is the thing that is completely under their control. The second, if I tell a salesperson to improve tonality, to keep the frame, to use this framework, to follow the script, right? It's because I know that they know what doing that means and how to do it. Because these are things I taught them when I onboarded them. So, oftentimes what you see, and I know that this is probably resonating with a lot of you guys, is that we give someone a critique, and then we're like, God, how do they not know how to do this? It's like, because you didn't teach them. And if you didn't teach them, and you expect them to come with it knowing how to do it, then did you interview them for it? Did you do a skill test for it? We cannot assume. People, just because they sold at a last company doesn't mean the same thing they do when they sell here. Completely different skills, completely different ways of doing things. Right? So we never want to assume, right? We have to understand what baseline skills we hire for. And if we're critiquing somebody, we have to know that when we give a critique, that they understand what it means. Because if somebody doesn't know how to improve tonality and you tell them to go do that, then they're going to feel very shitty. Third is that we want to give the critique at the rate of the behavior. So that means after every sales call, some sort of feedback system, right? So for example, in the best portfolio companies we have, the sales managers are literally doing calls daily with every single person, okay? Now, they can't do it after every single call. That would be impossible when you have a team of 20 or 30 people, right? But what they can do is that they have Slack threads where people are constantly giving them updates about their calls, and then they're getting reinforcement from them in there. And that is even more powerful than having a daily meeting. Because that Slack thread, where they can immediately say, great job, great win, great close, all these things, that's actually more useful and going to reinforce the behavior more than even a daily meeting, because it's happening closer to the behavior. Fourth, right? I would give individual sales reps critiques rather than the group so that it's most relevant to them. So a lot of times, what you see in big companies, for example, is people get really fed up of being in a big company because they feel like they're constantly getting punished for the one or two people that didn't do something right. And so we want to make sure that we're not punishing the group for two people that maybe aren't hitting their metrics. Because then it feels like the whole group's like, hey, do you not see that I'm like crushing it this week? It's like we have to read the room. The last one, or second to last, is that the sales manager is going to present the individual data to each salesperson, right? So like in our best portfolio company, for example, the sales manager sends the stats each week to the sales team and asks them for their feedback. They're like, what do you think of your numbers this week? Open-ended question. Now, at the same time, each of those sales reps, right, also document their own data on a daily basis and then are asked to critique themselves. So at the end of their daily stats, it just says, what do you think, how do you think you did today? And they just send it in. It's already shared with the sales manager. And the sales manager can see it every day. This is what critiquing somebody looks like. It's a lot of fucking work. But this is how you do it right. And this is why so many people don't understand, like, why can't I build an amazing culture? Why is it that people are leaving? Why is it? Because this stuff takes a lot of work and effort. And it's also taken me years to understand that a lot of the stuff that people have taught us and a lot of the traditional things that people say about how to give people feedback and all this stuff, honestly just doesn't work super well. And listen, I'm not saying this is like the Bible or anything like that. I'm just saying like this has worked super well for me and all of our portfolio companies. So, do you guys think if you committed to using just one of these 6 principles that you would improve your team? Great. Let's move on to the next one. So we have latency over intensity, we've got criticism versus insult, and then we have future versus past. So, the best leaders create a vision so compelling that their team is so focused on moving forward that they think not to look back. Okay? The best leaders also understand, right, in order to move forward, you must direct people into the future rather than resurrect the past. You focus them on what they can do right tomorrow rather than what they did wrong yesterday. So, focusing on the past and why something occurred gives zero direction as what to do next and often leaves people feeling shitty. Let's define some terms here when we talking about the future versus the past. So future-focused feedback. Feedback that tells people what to do in the future. Past-dwelling feedback. Feedback that tells people what they did wrong in the past. Why is it important to use future feedback, right? Where you're focusing on the future, you're talking about what to do next, okay? Has anyone ever heard of like the pink elephant in the room? It's like, don't think about the pink elephant, don't think about the pink elephant, don't think about the pink elephant. What are you thinking about? The pink fucking elephant. Don't think about how you fucked up that last sales call. Don't think about how you fucked up that last sales call. Don't think about how your tonality sucked. Don't think about the fact that you didn't close anybody last week. The mind goes in the direction of the dominant thought, regardless of if there's a not or if there's a don't, right? This is called ironic process theory. This is why focusing on the past doesn't work. In fact, it keeps people stuck more than it helps them get better. And it doesn't make them feel good either. Again, stealing their power from doing something better. So for example, when we insult somebody or we talk about the past, we make it clear that we don't know what people want to do, but we leave people with zero clue as to what to do next. All right? So have you ever told somebody what they did wrong and wondered why they didn't do it right next time? You're like, I said what you did wrong, but then he didn't do what I wanted him to do. It's like, yes, because you didn't tell him how to do it right. You told him what you didn't like, you didn't tell him what you did like. It's like, all right, let's just say it. Like, for example, every time I get my nails done, right? For like the first, I want to say like 4 years of my relationship with Alex, I get my nails done, and I would be like, what do you think? And he'd be like, what's for breakfast again? And I was like, what the fuck, right? And so finally I was like, dude, it was like years of guessing. It's like every time I would show my nails, it'd be something like chrome. He'd be like, I could just see by his face, it's like he's just trying to avoid the question. He didn't want to punish me, but he also didn't want to tell me he liked it because he didn't like it, right? So finally I was like, what would you like me to do? And he was like, always get French. I was like, that's it? He's like, yes. So what have I done? Now I always get my nails done as French because I asked him, what do I do next time? Rather than what do you not like? I know it's a silly example, but it's true. So here's what we want to start doing, okay? We want to go and shift from feedback that focuses on the past to feedback that focuses on what we want someone to do next, in the future. What does this look like? So instead of saying, don't run the class like that again, we say, next time we run the class, would you take the 60-minute rest breaks? Don't speak so softly when you're on the phone. Instead of saying that, when you're on the phone, try raising your voice like when you're speaking to a client when the gym is loud, giving them direction. You shouldn't talk